George Pickens and Garrett Wilson are being drafted back-to-back. We'll tell you which one you should be buying in your Dynasty leagues in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're doing a little show that we've called This or That, which we've done in the past. We're going to look at players that have similar ADPs, and we're going to hold our feet to the fire and make a decision, Kate. Let's start at wide receiver with two third-year receivers, George Pickens and Garrett Wilson. Pickens is being drafted as wide receiver 15. Wilson is being drafted as wide receiver 16. Kate, earlier this offseason, we saw Garrett Wilson being drafted as wide receiver 8, wide receiver 9, while George Pickens was all the way down at like wide receiver 31. You and I were adamant, like George Pickens is a massive value at that price. But now that their ADPs are right next to each other, which one do you prefer?
So I'm going to give a very, very slight lean to Garrett Wilson here, but I do want to give you some stats that show just how close this really is. Okay, so dating back to 2020 or 2021 or 2022. Oh my gosh, I can't get my years straight. Yeah. Dating back over the last 3 years. How about that? There is just a less than a 200-yard difference in terms of receiving production between Garrett Wilson and George Pickens. That has come on the back of almost an 80 catch gap between the two. And Garrett Wilson had 376 targets in that span to George Pickens 239. So there's no doubt that George Pickens has been a very, just efficient asset. They both have 10 receiving touchdowns in that span. They've both played on terrible offenses. George Pickens with a higher yards per reception average, higher average at the target, which we kind of know can translate to some more of that volatility, averaging the same exact yards after the catch per reception, average 4.1 yards after the catch per reception. George Pickens, 1.84 yards per route run to 1.68 yards per route run for Garrett Wilson. They've both struggled in terms of catchable targets. Mm-hmm. George Pickens statistically has been the much better wide receiver over Garrett Wilson, but I think you have to give the edge to the fact that Garrett Wilson probably has a much safer floor on a week-to-week basis than George Pickens will ever have.
Yeah, and again, both these players are very talented, but there's also some, I don't want to say off the field because that makes it sound like there's problems with or law or whatever, but you and I both know with George Pickens, he's a little bit more volatile than what I think Garrett Wilson is. And it's why
he's got a little bit more of that, like, that wide receiver one mentality. Garrett Wilson, I think just a little bit quieter, right?
Yeah.
Like,
to me, that does matter a little bit. I'm not worried about George Pickens being suspended, I'm not worried about Garrett Wilson being suspended for a game because of conduct detrimental to the team, or because he's not blocking on a certain play, or because he's revealing before the game starts who the starting quarterback is for a Sunday night football game. Like, I'm not worried about any of that stuff with Garrett Wilson. But what's interesting is these are two incredibly talented receivers who just happen to be on bad offenses. And now we have Garrett Wilson splitting targets with Davante Adams, while George Pickens really isn't splitting anything with anybody yet, maybe. But if Kate gets her wish, maybe he will pretty soon with Cooper Kupp. It's really close. I kind of default back to my pre-draft evaluation. And I know that's probably a bad way to do this because I'm looking at, I know I have a bias here. I thought Wilson was the better player going into the draft. I just think his game is a little bit more. I think he can be used in any game plan and against any kind of defense and any offense, right? You can put him in the slot, you can put him on the outside, you can give him touches in the backfield. Where I don't know if that's necessarily George Pickens. He's more of a 50-50 YOLO ball down the sideline, and that can be a little bit more fluky week to week.
What is interesting is I kind of wonder how much of this perception is also due to play calling usage and that type of thing. Because we actually heard, through training camp that they want to get George Pickens some looks out of the slot. They want to get him more on some in-breaking routes. He's really good after the catch. So, like, they wanted to put him in some more situations to maximize, some of that yards after the catch ability. We really haven't seen it to this point, but, like, I think he's capable of being utilized in that way. He even came out, he was on a podcast or a TV show over the past few days and kind of praised this, slot machine. It was actually framed on social media as like this great insult that uh, Amon-Ra St. Brown is crazy. I think he used the phrase like a slot merchant, but
Mhm.
he was paying, attention to the fact that like what they do by putting Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot is giving him these routes that are a little easier to win out against, opposing defensive backs in coverage, linebackers in coverage. Like, they get him in these advantageous situations where you can generate a little bit of space quickly and get the ball into his hands quickly and just let him be him in the
Yep.
open. That's what George Pickens was saying there. It seems like that's what he wants.
I,
He
I
would
have
be utilized that.
I understand how that would be beneficial to his targets. He would get more opportunities, but I don't think he's that type of receiver, Kate.
I don't think he's that type of receiver on an every down basis, but I don't think he's incapable. Like, again, when given the opportunity to play, like, it feels like every time he's kind of not playing directly on the sideline and getting some of these targets that are, pretty much setting you up to go directly out of bounds at the catch point, like, he's done pretty well after the catch. So, like, I think maybe the skill set is a little bit more versatile than what we've seen this far, but again, like, he's not the one calling the play. So his hands are kind of tied. And then as the final tiebreaker between the two, let's talk about their situations because I think both of them are in pretty interesting situations. Neither of them have benefited from quarterback play to this point in their
No,
career. Neither of them have benefited from good play calling to this point in their
no.
career. So, like, that makes it incredibly hard to properly evaluate what they might be able to contribute. And, like, imagine if you just dropped one of these guys in a Kevin O'Connell offense, like, drop
I
one of
know.
these guys in a Sean McVay offense. It
Well, we should
it's
also
hard.
mention both wide receivers have quarterbacks that are going into the final year of their deal. Aaron Rodgers, I mean, I would assume is going to retire after this year. Russell Wilson is a free agent. Justin Fields is a free agent. There's a chance that both of these guys have brand new quarterbacks in 2025, and it's just more turnover at that position. And I think this is why you've seen somebody like Garrett Wilson, as talented as he is, fall outside of the top 10 receivers, is because all of those other guys, Kate, like Nico Collins, stable quarterback situation. AJ Brown, stable quarterback situation. Marvin Harrison Jr., young and has Kyler Murray. Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, there's just no questions about who's throwing them the football for the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, who knows who's going to be throwing Garrett Wilson passes next year? Who knows?
Nobody knows. And honestly, like, I still wouldn't put it past him to request a trade at some point. I thought it was really interesting, a narrative that came out this week after the Jets loss. Apparently, Devontae Adams came into the locker room and gave like this galvanizing speech, and that kind of feels like Devontae Adams looking at Garrett Wilson saying, "I'm the captain now." Like,
I know.
it
It might be a
gave
good
"I
thing
am the
for him,
captain
though.
now" energy, and it makes me wonder, like, is Garrett Wilson actually the wide receiver one on this offense? I don't know if that's the case. He should be the wide receiver one somewhere with a decent quarterback. Maybe we don't see him play at all for the Jets next year. TBD. I think
DVD.
the tiebreaker here. We'll lean Wilson as a group here, just for the fact that he's used a little bit, more versatile. He gets some more versatile usage that can translate to a safer floor on a week-to-week basis. But can we both agree that the ceiling for each of these guys is probably not as far apart as the dynasty rankings over the past couple of years have indicated?
Yes, I would also say I think the ceilings for these players are a lot lower than maybe what we thought they would be a year ago, right? I think we were maybe thinking that, hey, if this breaks right and this breaks right, they could be a top 5 dynasty receiver. I just don't see it anymore.
Maybe that's the lesson here is let's not rank on if this goes right and if there are 2+ if this goes rights
Yeah.
on a player, we bump them down the ranks.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some other wide receivers that are being drafted right next to each other that just so happen to be bitter rivals. Let's talk about Xavier Worthy and Zay Flowers next. This episode is brought to you by Zbiotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you're going to feel so much better tomorrow. Again, here's how you use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And then step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed with no hangover and get ready to start the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they're going to refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are doing a little this or that on this Thursday. That's a lot of T's right in a row. Okay, let's go down the wide receiver rankings a little bit. Xavier Worthy is up to wide receiver 24, wide receiver of the Chiefs. Zay Flowers has actually seen his ADP drop to wide receiver 25. He was around the wide receiver 18 range in September. They're basically being drafted right next to each other, 38 and 39th overall. Which of these two do you prefer moving forward?
I'm going to be honest. I think that these players are both tied to great quarterbacks. They're actually in very similar situations. I think similar to the way that Pickens and Wilson were utilized. So looking at the pros and cons for each. Pros, they are both utilized kind of all over the field, right? Like you've seen Worthy so far be utilized, down the field a bit. You've seen him utilized on some more of these trick plays, end arounds. Like you've seen that diverse usage. You've also seen similar usage from Zay Flowers. They utilize him in the short range, let him make plays after the catch. They've also started, seeing what they have in him, even though he's a tinier wide receiver, utilizing him down the field a little bit and seeing what he can do in that deep passing game. They're both tied to great quarterbacks. The situations are glaringly similar. So they're both undersized guys. Is the tiebreaker the fact that Xavier Worthy is a rookie and he's on a rookie deal that we have one more year before we have to shake it up?
No. So Flowers is 3 years older than Xavier Worthy right now. So maybe if you care about the age a lot, to me, I care about the size difference, right? Now, Worthy's taller than Flowers, but Flowers is a legitimate 20 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
And you just see that the way the Ravens have used him, they can make him an every down receiver, right? Like they run a lot of their offense through him. There was a game earlier in the year where I think he had double-digit targets. I just don't ever see that being the case for Xavier Worthy. I think he's always going to have to be a complementary player or I do think Flowers has a chance to be that guy that gets 125, 130 targets in a season. I love the talent of Xavier Worthy. I would take Zay Flowers here pretty comfortably.
It's definitely closer for me, but I do think, I mean, yeah, you've posed an interesting point. They are both undersized, but Worthy by a much larger margin. So that seems pretty fair.
Well,
I
Kate, just
think,
really quickly against Tampa Bay last week. So he got banged up in this game. He hurt his ankle. But you look at the previous two games for Zay Flowers, 9 for 132 in the receiving game, and then against the Bengals the previous week, 7 for 111. I don't want to say those are going to happen every week, but I think he's capable of those games where he's just. I mean, it's 16 catches in 2 games. I don't ever see a world in which Xavier Worthy is going to do that.
yeah, I think, despite the diverse usage, it might just be that Flowers has a role that's a little bit more geared toward volume and a higher percentage of those targets. Whereas, again, maybe kind of similar to Pickens and Wilson, maybe the ceiling from a yards per reception standpoint feel a little bit higher for a guy like Xavier Worthy. But when you look at the potential on an every down basis, Wilson gets more opportunities. So yeah, you might have flipped me on this one because I really thought
I love Worthy.
The only thing as a kind of decider would be the contract, but I do think you're right in terms of just that overall consistency on what he offers.
And I also think the Chiefs want to play a certain brand of football in the sense of we're going to spread the ball out, right? And we know that Travis Kelce isn't going to be there in the long term, right? He's probably going to be gone maybe after this year. Rashee Rice is going to obviously miss all of this year and potentially a lot of next year. But I do just get the sense that Rashee Rice is going to stick around, and maybe he's not a factor until the second half of 2025, but he is somebody that fits really well with Patrick Mahomes. He's the one that's getting the volume in this offense. I think big picture, I thought the Chiefs' plan this year going into the season was let's let Rashee Rice be our volume guy. He's the guy that we get 8 to 10 targets and move the chains. Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy are the guys that give us the deep passing attack, right? We're going to give them 2 or 3.
Are you assuming they re-sign Hollywood Brown?
No, I'm saying I think this was a plan going into the year. I think the plan was to get those guys to be your vertical stuff, to open up the underneath stuff for Rashee Rice, Kelce in the run game. I got to believe that that's going to continue to be the case moving forward, where Worthy's going to be the guy stretching the field, but it's going to be Rice, the tight end, and the run game that does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You may have swayed me, Team Z.
But go buy Xavier Worthy too. I still think if you can get him outside of wide receiver 20 prices, right? I think it makes sense. You know how much I love Jackson Smith and Jigba, right?
Yeah.
I would trade JSN for Xavier Worthy right now, and I'm not sure it's all that close.
Yeah.
I want both these guys on my team. I think it's my takeaway.
That's the takeaway is yes. I want both of these guys for sure.
All right. Let's go to a different position. Let's talk about the tight end position where there's Brock Bowers and then there's 50 feet of crap. Kate, let's talk about who you would want as tight end 2. Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, maybe Dalton Kincaid. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can get started with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. This is a really interesting week in the NFL. Usually week 8, we get some bye weeks. We have a London game. Not the case. We have 13 Sunday afternoon games. It's absolutely wild. And then my Cowboys play on Sunday Night Football. The Steelers play on Monday Night Football against the Giants. going to be a terrible game. Go pick the Steelers to win the money line there. Use your $5 bet there. Get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's a great week to start betting on the NFL on FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. They cover the entire NFL. It's a fantastic show. Our guy, Matt Williamson, pops on every Friday with Tony. Make sure you check it out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, Kate, last one. Let's go to the tight end position, which has been a mixed bag. Is that nice? Is that a nice way to say that the tight ends have been crap this year? Brock Bowers has ascended to tight end 1. He's 21 years old. He's a top 25 pick in every single Dynasty startup right now. After Bowers, we have Trey McBride at tight end 2, 24 years old. We've got Sam Laporta, tight end 3, 23 years old. Their ADPs could be similar, or it couldn't be more similar. Which of these 2 do you prefer moving forward?
I'm trying not to get take locked here because I've never been the biggest, craziest Trey McBride fan. I've been a fan, but not so much sold on the top tier production value. Trey McBride to this point, 4 games outside or as tight end 10 or worse this year, 2 top 5 finishes. Again, kind of just a mixed bag in general. But Sam Laporta, unfortunately, has also been a mixed bag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the tiebreaker of the fact that the Lions just have the better overall offense, have, I think, more stability at quarterback in terms of his passing production. And I'm going to roll with Sam Laporta here because I think otherwise, from what we've seen so far, both of them have their concerns, right? The target share in the Arizona Cardinals offense, it has not solely been, just Marvin Harrison Jr., just Trey McBride. They're spreading the ball out a ton. Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, also
Greg Dortch, promotion commotion superstar from last week. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Touchdown himself. They're spreading the ball around a ton, and I don't think they feel the need to force feed any one particular player targets. I think it's the same case for the Lions. So if that's true, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go with the guy that I think truly is in the better overall offensive situation.
Yeah, you know how I feel about Sam Laporta. Last year when we were talking about him pre-draft, I would always get a little twinkle in my eye when Sam Laporta. I mean, just love watching him play. But as somebody who has followed him since high school, you can tell that he's hurt. He does not look like the same athlete at all, Kate. He suffered a knee injury late last year, was on the injury report early this year. I got to assume that he's going to get better. He's going to get healthier. This was somebody, Kate, who was tight end 1 all off season long, right? For most people, at least. Most people. But I'm going Trey McBride. One of the things I like about McBride is he's just so involved in this offense. Now, he hasn't caught a touchdown this season, which is a little fluky, and he's really never been a big touchdown scorer, 4 total touchdowns in his career. But I can live with that when you are getting so many targets. And you look at the last couple of games, 6 for 53, 8 for 96, 5 for 51. Tight end for me is a position where I want the consistency. I want the floor. If you can just give me 10 to 11 PPR points every single week, eventually it's all going to even out to being a top 2, top 3 tight end. I just have more trust in Trey McBride right now than I do Sam Laporta.
I mean, I think that's kind of what's throwing me for a loop here, though, because what really has changed here long term for this offense compared to last year? They have gotten Jameson Williams more involved, now out for a 2-game suspension. When will his woes ever end? I have to imagine that that's a frustrating thing for your coaches because even if you are healthy, these circumstances keep popping up that have you off the field elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
How much of them not heavily involving Laporta do you think could be due to the fact that maybe he's not 100% healthy? Like, could it be by necessity rather than intended design?
It just seems like, we were seeing last year, Laporta would get pretty consistently 8 to 9 targets a game. Now he's got like 2 or 3 targets total over the last couple of weeks. To me, that just indicates like he's not healthy and they just don't want to overwork him right now. They don't need to because they have a healthy Jahmyr Gibbs. They have a healthy David Montgomery. Amon-Ra St. Brown is playing really well. My guess is they're just trying to get through this first half of the year. And maybe that's when we'll see the usage ramp up. But on top of that, Kate, like look at all the weapons they have compared to what the Cardinals have, right? Obviously, the Cardinals have Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyler's legs, James Conner, but it's still just not quite the same. And it feels like Trey McBride's role in that offense is very, very stable. And if he can just start scoring, he doesn't need to score a ton, but if he can give us 6 touchdowns every year, I think he'll pretty comfortably be tight end 2.
But I mean, as you said, it's not like this has been a guy who's built his fantasy empire on scoring touchdowns.
No.
It's been, volume. I think you're probably right in the fact that maybe McBride has like a generally kind of a safer floor, maybe. But I just don't know that, are the touchdowns all that unfluky. He has just a single target in the red zone all of this season. A single target. Like, you look at a guy like Isaiah Likely, backup tight end, has 6. George Kittle, 5. Brenton Strange, 5. Like, it is something that he's not commanding those specific targets that just has me wondering, like, is it going to be a fluky? Like, are touchdowns as fluky for Trey McBride, or should we just not really even factor consistent touchdown upside into our kind of narrative for him every week? Because he's not being utilized there.
No, he's not. One of the things I do like about McBride since Kyler Murray has come back in the last 14 games, he's averaging 6 for 61. Again, are those earth-shattering numbers that rival Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski? Absolutely not. But I think you'll be very happy with 6 for 60 from your tight end every week, because who else outside of my guy Brock Bowers is giving that to you? Like, who's giving you that floor weekly that you can just count on? Hey, this guy's going to be a productive player for me week in and week out.
I mean, yeah, all of that is fair. I just am sick to my stomach with the fact that we've got 3 different players that have more targets on the offense inside the red zone than
I know.
Elijah Pickens has 1 more target inside the end zone than
I
Trey
know.
McBride.
I know.
Xavier Weaver, who has a single target all year long. That target came in the end zone. That is the same number of targets. So, like, again, the touchdowns, I think maybe it just comes down to, like, what do you value more on a week-to-week basis? Do you value upside? Because I think Laporta has that higher upside. Maybe it comes down to roster construction as well. Do you need is your roster constructed of more boom bust guys that you could benefit from just a steady 10 points every week? Or do you have a wide receiver and running back core that provides you a pretty safe weekly floor, but you need that upside of a potential 20-point game? Maybe that's your tiebreaker.
I want the safety at the tight end position because having the upside is great. But there's just not the tight ends anymore. They give us the Travis Kelce upside, the Rob Gronkowski upside. Just give me the guys that are going to give me double-digit fantasy points every single week, and we'll move on. Because what I can't have are the tight ends that go, 7 for 70 and a touchdown one week and then 1 for 5 the following week. That up and down consistency is just too much for me in a week-to-week fantasy league, dynasty league.
Yeah. Fair.
All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out the YouTube channel as well. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. We'll be back here on Friday to break it all down.